Hey guys, this is Mike Mahaffey, the old bastard BJJ guy, here for BJJ Mental Models. Back in my day, we had to walk uphill in the snow both ways to get to the academy just to learn some crappy technique from a random purple belt. You kids have it so easy because now you can just subscribe to BJJ Mental Models Premium and get tons of great audio courses to learn new techniques, enhance your mindset, and entertain yourself. You can even get personalized rolling reviews from some of your favorite BJJ Mental Models coaches, including me. It's like having your own seminar, you spoiled little whippersnappers. So what are you waiting for? Subscribe to BJJ Mental Models Premium right now, get off my lawn, and go train.
Hey, welcome to BJJ Mental Models, episode 288. I'm Steve Kwan. BJJ Mental Models is your guide to a conceptual and intelligent jiu-jitsu approach, and I am back again with friend of the show, Chris Wojcik. Chris, how's it going, sir?
It's going great, man. Glad to be back. Glad to be back on my favorite jiu-jitsu podcast.
Aw, thanks, buddy. I assume you're not just saying that because we sponsor your newsletter, right?
No, you were my favorite jiu-jitsu podcast before you sponsored my newsletter, and now you've really just cemented the fact that you're my favorite jiu-jitsu podcast.
Hey, you know what? Let's do a quick intro here. It wasn't that long ago that you were on the show, but you never know. Do you want to give everyone a quick hello and tell them about yourself?
Yeah. Okay, so my name is Chris Wojcik. I'm a black belt under Jeff Serafin. I came up training in the Chicagoland area under Jeff, and I recently, almost a year ago now, so I guess, it was, I think last time when I came on, it was super recent, but now, I've been in Austin, Texas for just about a year, training at the B team, traveling a lot, competing, and then I'm also the writer of the Grappler's Diary, which is like an Instagram page and Jiu-Jitsu Substack. And that's really my kind of, Jiu-Jitsu credentials. I've spent a lot of time competing in, ADCC trials, no-gi stuff the last year, and just writing a lot. And that's pretty much all I do at this point is train and write. So.
And it's funny you mentioned that because the Grappler's Diary is actually my favorite jiu-jitsu newsletter. So good timing there, good reciprocation going on. So you also mentioned that your coach is Jeff Serafin. That's interesting because on Reddit a few days ago, I saw this guy posting about this just beautiful gym that he was opening up. And I noticed that his handle was something like Serafin BJJ. And I asked, is this Jeff Serafin? And he said, sure is. And I said, that's so cool because I know your guy, Chris. And so we've been talking to Jeff and I've been trying to get him on the podcast too. So pretty soon we're probably going to have him on. I'm really excited to have that chat as well. He seems like a pretty good guy, and holy smokes, that gym that they opened is just amazing to look at.
Oh, dude, it's incredible. So we pretty much lost the original gym. I mean, it's Jeff's story to tell, but basically this project is 5 years in the making and it's finally ready. I will be back in Chicago in July and I'll get to see it. And I'm just so excited. It's going to be incredible.
Yeah. And you mentioned that you're down in Austin training at the B team. I actually didn't realize you were at the B team now. It's interesting because I was just in Texas, not Austin, but in Dallas. I wasn't intending to go there, but I had a connecting flight there. American Airlines, just amazing service, by the way. What an awful company they are. I got stranded in Dallas for 2 days because of American Airlines. Due to their lateness, my flight connection was missed, and they weren't able to put me onto a flight home for 2 more days. So, man, at some point I've got to send them some angry emails and try to recoup all of the costs I incurred because of them. But yeah, one thing I have learned, do not fly American.
Airlines are they're getting so crazy, United is really crazy with the bags. I've heard American is crazy with the cancellations. Spirit is terrible. I'm the amount of airlines that I can tolerate is and I've traveled a lot for jiu-jitsu. So it's the amount of airlines I can tolerate at this point is just slimmer and slimmer.
Yeah, well, I was out there doing a jiu-jitsu camp. For those who don't know, BJJ Mental Models has started doing camps right now around North America, but we might expand beyond. So we actually had an awesome 5-day camp, kind of turned into a 7-day trip for the reasons I brought up, but it was so cool. We got together with Mike Mahaffey, the old bastard jiu-jitsu guy, Josh Wentworth, known as Kintanon on Reddit, Rob Bernacki was there, Matt and Amy Linsemeyer, Jesse Walker from Rough Hands BJJ. It was really a cool thing. So we all got together and had this big collaborative seminar, but there has been a lot of chatter about maybe doing a Texas area seminar tour. So maybe at some point I'll get to meet up with you in person, man, and we could do a seminar together. I think that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I think that would be, a lot of fun. It's really cool that you've expanded into doing the camps. I think that's like a really cool, I've taught at one camp in South Carolina, and it was like a ton of fun. I taught with, it was like Sean Applegate, Gabe Tuttle, Gio Martinez, and two other guys who I can't remember right now, but it was like just an incredible experience, like so much knowledge in one training room over like a couple days. It was like super fun. The jiu-jitsu camps are cool and they're becoming more popular.
Yeah, I definitely want to start getting into more of those. I mean, it's really just all about the numbers and the math. How can you do this in a way that financially makes sense for all of the coaches? But we're going to play around with that and see if we can figure out a good way to do it. But all of that aside, let's talk about your stuff, man. Last time you were on here, we had an awesome chat about judo, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, and how those all tie together in the current meta. But there's something else that you've been exploring, and I believe, if I understand correctly, this might tie into an instructional you've got coming up soon, right?
An instructional, it's actually already out, but it is still relevant and still expanding constantly. So I released an instructional in January, February called Don't Stand Up. So it's kind of funny, the last time I was on here, we were talking about all the wrestling and stand-up stuff that I was working on. And now the last, I would say 6 months have been spent on not standing up and working on kind of bringing the guard back in a way that makes sense in the no-gi meta, especially for competition. So that's like kind of been my obsession for the last, probably the last year, I would say. I think when you and I talked last, I was kind of starting to, I moved down to Texas and I spent a lot of time wrestling. And then I started really late fall this year, especially playing a lot of open guard and working on new stuff from open guard. And that's kind of where the instructional went. And that's kind of what I've been working on.
So what we had planned to talk about here today was an aspect of your instructional, specifically leg entanglements from the open guard. Tell me a little bit more about this. Before we get too deep into the reads, explain to me what you found in your studies and what kind of material you put together on this instructional. What are your thoughts on the current meta and how open guard and leg entries from open guard fit into all of that?
Yeah, okay. So I think that one thing that happened, if you look at competitive jiu-jitsu in the last, probably since the last ADCC, really this goes back to 2019. So in 2019, Lachlan Giles, he debuted this leg attack called the K-guard. And it was no one was really doing it. No one really knew what it was. And he heel hooked guys who are way bigger and way stronger than him, right? Which is the, kind of what we all love about jiu-jitsu is that a small guy can tap out a big guy if he has a technique that he doesn't know. So he used K-guard, which is in my instructional, I differentiate between internal and external leg entries. And so a K-guard would be an external leg entry where you're rotating around your partner's body. Leg entries off of a De La Riva guard would be of a similar family. So these leg entries are usually going to result in you ending up in a 50-50 position as opposed to saddle or cross-ashi or a position where you have kind of your leg over. I know there's lots of different nomenclatures, but saddle and 50-50 are the main kind of positions that we're entering to. And with a external leg entry, we're rotating towards the backside. And then with an internal leg entry, we're rotating towards inside in between our partner's legs.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Interesting you bring that up because this is a concept that we've talked about quite a bit on the show here. I've always called it the inside channel versus the outside channel. And there's two different approaches you can take. When I started jiu-jitsu and as I came up in the ranks, it was kind of drilled into me and I sort of discovered on my own that going for the inside channel is pretty much always a good strategy. That's talking about things like underhooks, getting between the legs. And for a while, that was almost a universal recommendation for me to tell people to go through the inside just because it's such a strong position. You can get in close, you can take away space, you can make it hard for them to counter you. But as you mentioned, there has been an explosion of people going around and attacking the outside. So things like De La Riva guard, K guard, where instead of going through the legs on the inside, you're going around the outside. A lot of the time when you do that, you're trying to force an internal rotation of the leg and you're trying to get behind them onto their back or into some sort of leg entanglement. And they both work. I would say that for older, slower, less athletic people, a lot of the time taking the inside is probably the safer route. And I think that's why you see so many coaches like John Danaher and Gordon Ryan talk about this. But if you have the body type and the athleticism and the technical prowess, you can absolutely attack around the outside. Lachlan is a great example of this. I'd also cite Margot Ciccarelli as someone who does this a lot, who uses speed and rotation to get around to the outside. So both are applicable. And I'm assuming that how you kind of choose between the two of these is a big part of your framework when it comes to leg entanglements from the open guard.
Yeah, so the way that I think about it is there's kind of like an interplay that's happening in the open guard meta. And if we were to expand, like, if we're going to think about the open guard as a whole, essentially the way that I was able to like bring back the open guard for myself against, like, I'm training with like world-class guard passers every day. So I really had to kind of get deep into the game to figure out a way to still be able to play guard. There's a reason why everyone was just standing up for so long, but it's because the guard is like, against a good passer, the guard is not a place that you want to spend too much time in. So I think that for me, I started working on creating dilemmas all throughout my open guard. And when we come back to leg entries, essentially I'm thinking about, if I'm attacking internally, my partner is going to probably backstep to defend the internal rotation. And this could be a false reap. This could be a saddle entry from butterfly guard or any sort of rotation like that. And what's really common from there is going to be backstepping and trying to put your weight on the opposite leg than the one that you're attacking. And so the way that we can, remain kind of offensive is by attacking externally, right? So if our partner is defending the internal rotation, then we attack externally. If our partner is turning towards us to prevent external rotation, then we attack internally.
Now let's expand on this a bit, because this is an important concept that probably is definitely hard for people to visualize, and it might not be terminology they've used before. I have heard Rob Bernacki from Island Top Team use this language of internal versus external rotation. That's kind of where I picked it up from, and I found it really helpful to think about things in this way. I'll give my definition here, Chris, and you jump in and tell me if I'm doing it wrong or if you have any further color to add on to it. But internal rotation and external rotation pertain to the direction in which you're twisting someone's joint. Usually in jiu-jitsu, that means you're twisting their elbow and their arm, or their knee and their leg. And examples include, if let's say I'm between your legs and I'm trying to flare your leg out, like you might do with a waiter sweep, for instance, where I'm trying to flare your knee out to the side, that would be external rotation. It definitely works, but your body is also much more accustomed to twisting in that way. So when you externally rotate someone's leg, it takes the muscle and the power out of it, but they're still normally going to be facing you and they still have some ability to fight. The counter example with the equivalent for the upper body with the arms would be, if I Americana someone, that would be an external rotation. Now, an internal rotation is where you twist that middle joint, like the knee or the elbow, inward. That can do a lot more damage. So an example of an internal rotation submission on the legs would be a heel hook. On the arm, it would be the kimura. And so these are kind of tricky because you're really twisting someone's limb in a way where there's a significant potential of damage. It's very hard for them to defend. But one of the interesting things about those internal rotations is, to defend them, the victim often has to expose their back. So going for things like a kimura or a leg reap is often a great way to get the person to expose their back, whereas an external rotation where you attack from the inside out, you're often making the elbows or the knees flare out, which weakens them, but they're often still face to face with you. Is that a good explanation, Chris, or did I screw it up?
I think that some of the points that you made are exactly kind of what I'm looking for. I will also just go one step deeper and apply it kind of more to the guard. So when I think about external attacks from the guard, I'm rotating around my partner to get to their back. When I'm thinking about internal attacks, I'm rotating more so under them if they're standing to get to their back. And either way, we're trying to work to the back. And when our partner is not giving us the back, that's exposing the legs. And that actually takes us kind of to another idea that is kind of central to, one, the content in my instructional, which obviously I'm going to mention that, but also two, just a general concept for the open guard is the interplay between back exposure and leg attacks. So generally speaking, to avoid most leg attacks, you're going to expose your back. And to avoid back takes, you're going to expose your legs. So I think that's like another interesting point. But generally speaking, the point that you made is exactly kind of the basics of it. And just to kind of take it to a more advanced level, we're going to apply that to the open guard and look at like rotating inside or rotating outside.
Got it. I really like that idea of merging internally and externally rotating attacks together, because you're right. If people defend in one direction, it's going to open them up in the other direction. And a common mistake that people make is they go in one direction and then they just commit to it completely, even when their opponent is intelligently defending, and it is no longer the easiest way to move forward. So the ability to switch and pivot, that's just such a key part of being fluid in jiu-jitsu and finding openings when your opponent is putting up defenses elsewhere.
I think also too, like the guard, and this kind of goes down to like a underlying concept of trying to save the guard and, you know, make the guard relevant at the high levels again. What the guard players are doing at the highest levels that I'm seeing, and that something I've tried to build for myself, is it requires a great deal of knowledge and understanding of different reactions, but also too, playing open guard at a high level, or just, you know, trying to do it effectively against good passers, requires a lot of action. So that doesn't necessarily mean a lot of work, but it means that there's a lot of movement that's required from the bottom position. And so I think that's another important point to make, is that like when we're playing open guard in no-gi and looking to attack the legs, sometimes we have to attack the upper body to get to the lower body, or sometimes we have to attack the lower body to get to the upper body. So we're going to have to like lay traps, and there's going to be so much interplay throughout the entire, you know, open guard situation, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. The benefit that the top player in guard has is they, by default, will have base. Their feet or their knees will be on the ground, and if they're able to be stationary, that allows them to be quite stable and very hard to move. A mistake a lot of people make when attacking someone from bottom guard is they'll try to do one thing and it doesn't work because their opponent is completely in base. And so they'll try a technique and then it doesn't work, they give up. But what you're talking about is a key strategy really for all of jiu-jitsu. But when the person is on top of you in guard, it's very important. And that is to just keep attacking their base, keep wobbling them so that they can never get steady. This was a big breakthrough for me playing the outside hook guard, sometimes called the De La Riva guard. Just trying to do a sweep from there very rarely works. So a big part of playing De La Riva is using your legs to push and pull your opponent and force them to be constantly in wobbly mode. And it is the fact that they are never able to base in a stable fashion that allows that guard to work as effectively as it does. That's just such a key idea with really any type of a guard. You want to make sure that the person on top is never able to stand on a stable platform. You want to make sure you're always attacking their base and moving them around so that they can't get that stability, because if you can keep them in motion and keep them adjusting, you're more likely to catch them in a moment where their weight is on the wrong foot or their legs have been crossed in a bad way. And that's when things like sweeps or get-ups get way easier to do.
I agree completely. And I think that an important thing kind of to take from that as well is like, this is an idea that I like, it's applicable in gi jiu-jitsu as well, but I think that it's so much more so in no-gi, because in the gi you have the luxury of the grips, which allow you to slow somebody down. In no-gi, it's significantly harder to slow somebody down. But, you know, I've trained in the gi maybe twice this year, but I used to train in the gi every day for 5-6 years of my training. And when I would do that, one thing that I would think about was, okay, grips. Get to my grips, and then when we work from the grips, we get a position, right? So it would be get my grips, and I like to play lasso guard. So I would throw a lasso hook in or a spider guard, and I would work from the grip. In no-gi, this can be more fluid. So like you'll try to make like a De La Riva hook, but you can't really just hold a De La Riva in no-gi. It's very hard, especially if you're slippery. Or a butterfly hook even. It's pretty easy for your partner to disengage. So essentially what we need to be doing to kind of counteract that is we need to be attacking immediately when we secure our grips. And I think that in the gi you can do this as well, but I think the consequences for not doing it are much more severe in no-gi. And this is why I think that a lot of people have kind of drifted away, why the meta drifted away from the guard in no-gi for a while.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. The thing that you have as a major advantage in the gi is the ability to just set grips and pull someone into your guard. It's much harder to do that in no-gi. As a gi player, I benefit very much from this. If I get hands on your lapel and your sleeve, I can probably just get you into my guard by just pulling and falling back. That's the benefit of those very strong grips. Something on the podcast that we talk about is the concept of how grips dictate position. And whoever sets the grips in a dominant fashion first is probably going to be the person who dictates the position. In the gi, just getting a good collar sleeve grip or other upper body grip when you're standing up allows you to get the person somewhat reliably into a guard. In no-gi, it's much harder to set those grips. So I think you're right. I think that's why guard pulls are a lot harder to do in no-gi, because you can't just grab someone and then fall back and assume they're going to land up in your guard.
I think the biggest thing, no-gi guard is so much more work. I think it's harder to stabilize a pass in no-gi, right? Because I think that if you pass someone's guard and then you grab the back of their collar or something like that and use that to hold them down, it's so escaping side control is so much harder in no-gi. But I think that holding your guard and being offensive from the guard is much more difficult when you're playing without a gi on. And I think the solution to that is high activity, and that means chaining attacks together. And then I think that in order to, kind of just to bring it back to our overarching point for the day, is working towards the legs or towards the upper body and using the interplay to find the openings.
Now, I would ask you here, when people talk about leg entanglements from open guard, I think a lot of the time where people's minds go is the person on top is standing up. But that's not always guaranteed. There are a lot of people who will kneel in open guard. The general conventional wisdom is that you should try to stand in guard if you can, but that is not always the case. There are people who are quite effective at kneeling or switching levels, going from standing to kneeling. Do you find that going for leg entanglements is as effective against a kneeling opponent, or are you trying to do this from a position where your opponent is standing? I'm curious if there's a difference between the kneeling and standing situations.
So there's definitely a big difference between the kneeling and the standing. So in the case of me playing, let's say seated guard against a standing opponent. We'll start with a standing opponent. When I'm playing seated guard against a standing opponent or playing supine guard against a standing opponent, the interplay is going to be attacking the legs, which is going to be kind of a essential part of what I'm doing. Always attacking the legs, and then the interplay will be with wrestling up. So, even if you want to be a guard player, you can't really escape wrestling. And I'm going to be using what I heard Sean Applegate call it a few years ago, a push-pull dilemma. So essentially, if I'm pushing into somebody, they are going to react by pushing back into me. Then I can pull them forward and get into their legs. Or if I pull someone into me and they pull away, then I can push into them and wrestle up. So the standing opponent, the interplay is going to be wrestling up and attacking the legs, either internal leg attacks like shin on shin or false reap, or external leg attacks like the K guard like we talked about a little while ago. If I have a kneeling opponent, now I'm going to be looking to attack the upper body, right? Because the thing about no-gi is if you have a standing opponent, trying to throw a triangle on a standing opponent in no-gi is really tough. Trying to attack an arm bar on a standing opponent when you don't have a sleeve grip is really tough. In the gi, you can break posture and you can shoot your hips high and try to find a triangle or an up omoplata. I remember I used to love omoplata from De La Riva back when I was doing the gi. You can find all of these techniques that are simply just not available, when you don't have a gi on. So when we're playing with a standing opponent, we're interplaying wrestling up and leg locks. While we're playing seated guard or supine guard against a kneeling opponent, now we're going to start integrating triangles, choi bar, which is if you kind of try to fight for an underhook and then attack an arm bar from there, or straight arm bar or closed guard arm bar. And a lot, last fall, I was hitting this a lot in competition, which kind of led me to do the instructional of okay, I'm attacking the legs. Legs are not working because my partner is low. So now I attack upper body. Now legs are not working because my partner is standing, but they're not letting me get into the legs. So now I'm going to wrestle up. So the kneeling opponent, we're looking for upper body submissions to get to the legs, because you can still attack the legs on a kneeling opponent, but you need to do a little bit of work. Same thing if you're attacking a standing opponent, you can still attack the legs, but if they're not letting you, You need to threaten the wrestling up, or you need to threaten some sort of heisting and then use that to get back to the legs.
Great point. Something that Rafael Lovato Jr. has talked about is that when you're playing guard, you need different answers for when your opponent is on 2 knees, 1 knee, or standing up. So if someone's standing up, maybe you go for a leg entanglement, or maybe you try to chop them down. As you mentioned, a lot of upper body submissions like arm bars and triangles are hard to do against a completely standing opponent. So you can try to chop them down and force them to kneel so that they have more base. And there you have options to get at the upper body. Something that I enjoy doing is when I can get my opponent to kneel on both legs, instead of trying to sweep from there, I will do a technical stand-up. As you said, a hip heist. I'll try to get up, maybe even try to latch onto their head, get a front headlock. I find that to be a much easier approach than trying to sweep if they're down on both knees. If someone is kneeling on both legs, I will assume that trying to get a sweep is going to be the path of most resistance because they are in extremely solid base. But if they're down on both knees, their mobility is limited. So if I can convince my opponent to come down on both knees, I will then perhaps try to go for a technical stand-up and exploit the fact that I might be able to get up faster than them. And then I'm on top, they're on bottom. I get my 2 points regardless. It's maybe not as classic as a butterfly sweep or a scissor sweep, but it's still going to be effective if you want to get on top position.
One point I would make to kind of like expand on what you just said, because I think that's really important. You know, something that you said is that like, it's much harder to sweep someone when they're on their knees. One thing that I do a lot when I'm grappling with a kneeling opponent is I hand fight where I'm sitting on my butt and they're kneeling, and I hand fight the exact same way I would hand fight when I'm wrestling. Because when you're playing guard, the benefit of winning a hand fight against a kneeling opponent is that you'll sweep them very easily. If you lose a hand fight, you know, and you like concede an underhook, you still have a guard. You're not getting passed necessarily. So you're playing kind of like a positive sum game where if you lose, you still are going to be in a better situation than if they lose.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. We've talked on the podcast before about how for every situation you can find yourself in, you want to do a little return on investment calculation in your head. What's the best benefit I could achieve and what's the worst outcome? And make a decision as to whether it's worth the risk. And there are some attacks you can do that will yield positive outcomes but have lower risk. An example I often give is between the 3 common guard submissions, like the triangle, the omoplata, and the armbar. Given the choice, if all other variables are equal, I will try to do the omoplata. And the reason why is because with an armbar or a triangle, if I screw it up, the consequences are pretty dire. I'm probably going to get stacked and get passed. Whereas it's a lot harder for an opponent to do that from an omoplata. With an omoplata, if I fail, the most likely outcome is I'm probably still going to get the sweep. So even the worst case scenario is a good thing. And you brought that up here. A great point about hand fighting against a kneeling opponent is that if you can off balance them there, then you have options to get to their back. You have sweeps that you can do. You can get up without having to worry too much about them taking you down on the way up. Whereas if they are able to get that underhook, you're still alive. So that's a situation where the best outcome is good and the worst outcome is still survivable.
Yeah, and I think also too, another interesting point that you made is like when we look at these kind of ROI calculations that we make throughout jiu-jitsu, when we think about leg entanglements, the benefit of like entering the legs is if you can interplay leg locks with sweeps, the benefit is going to be, again, like very positive sum for you. So like if I try to attack your legs and you defend properly, I'm maybe not going to be able to get a leg lock, but I more than likely will be able to get a sweep. And then if I'm defending leg locks, I'm going to put myself in a really bad position because I have to react. Because the way that you defend a leg lock is you rotate your body, like most leg locks. The way that you defend them is by rotating your body away from your partner, which is going to expose your back to them, which is going to make it, you know, you're either going to get your back taken or you're going to have to scramble all the way back to your butt and end up getting swept. So it's another example of like a positive sum situation, like a high ROI situation is just attacking the legs in general. Because even if you don't get the leg lock, you're still in a great position to probably sweep. You know, obviously there are counter leg locks and things like this that we have to be aware of. But, you know, for the most part, attacking the legs is a pretty safe thing to do.
That's a great point because You can really manipulate your opponent if you do this. Many grapplers still look at classic jiu-jitsu and modern leg entanglements as two different paths. And if you can get them into a leg entanglement, they may go into leg entanglement mode where now they think we're doing leg fighting. And if you switch from one to the other, so you use the leg entanglement as an opportunity to sweep them, or you just get up and start passing, sometimes you can catch people off guard because they don't expect that. They think now their job is to defend their legs from submissions, but if you switch back to that more classic get up and pass strategy, you can catch people leaving openings where you don't expect it.
Yeah, I think that, and you'll see those throughout like different open guard situations, like positions where like people, I think one mistake that a lot of people will make is they'll like try to like, if someone enters the legs on them, they will take it as a cue that they now have to play leg locks versus, there's a guy who I train with at the gym and he, I'm known as like a pretty good leg locker, and most people are like, oh, I don't want to play leg locks on Chris. But there are guys who are like, they have attributes and skills that are like very bad for me, right? Like guys who are really good passers or who are really good wrestlers can give me problems. But if I get to the legs, then they're going to kind of have their day with me. And so what they'll try to do is when I attack the legs, then they'll try to really, whether it's 50-50 or saddle, or they're not looking to counter. They don't want to all they're trying to do is clear the position. And that's going to open up different attacks for me. So that's kind of like the next level, I would say.
Makes a ton of sense. So are there body type considerations here? I always ask this because some people are going to have shorter limbs, longer limbs, and I always want to get people's perspectives on when this kind of strategy works best. So for someone who has, say, my body type, maybe they're shorter and more compact, what kind of people do I want to think open guard leg entanglements against? And how would that change against someone who's maybe longer, lankier?
So in my experience, the guys so I'm about average build, I would say. I'm about 5'9.5", about 185, so I'm not like huge. I'm not super tall. I'm not small. And the reason that I'm able to have success with this style is hip flexibility. Because of that, I play a lot of false reap and I play a lot of K-guard, because these are two leg entanglements that require a great deal of flexibility and also mobility, right? Because you're swinging your legs a lot and moving a lot. I'd say if you are more compact and shorter, I would probably put more emphasis on the internal entries. And I think K-guard can still be something that you can pull off. I would say instead of maybe trying to go false reap inside entries where you're throwing your leg and trying to like Kani Basami or get in on the legs this way, I would say maybe looking more to play butterfly guard and interplay with sweeps like wrestling up or sumigeshi or taking your partner over, and then looking for like matrix style back takes on the outside. Because the nice thing about like the matrix style attacks is you don't need to be securing the knee line. You just need to be getting your hips behind your opponent. So I would say like that would be my kind of consideration, is like you're not going to attack the legs the same way Craig Jones does if you're shorter, right? Because Craig Jones is like a giant guy. And so I wouldn't study like the way the biggest guy is attacking the legs if I don't have that body.
Yeah, I often hear different answers from people about leg entanglements and body types. As a smaller and more compact guy, what I can say is, I am not a leg locker. I don't really have that skill set, although I'm not bad at defending myself and avoiding those situations. But I am usually playing a compact game and trying to use leg entanglements to advance position. And I have found that being compact, getting underneath a person, going into situations like single leg X guard and leg dragging, that kind of stuff is very effective. It may be true that some submissions like knee bars and some types of ankle locks might be harder for me to finish against a very tall person, but I have found going underneath them, entangling the legs and getting up is always a killer strategy. That's one of the main ways that I get on top. People who listen to this podcast know that I am a notorious turtle player. And for people who haven't rolled with me, they might assume that that means I'm just sitting there and letting people maul me. But really what I'm kind of doing is playing almost a butterfly guard, but upside down. So I'm trying to use that as an opportunity to roll, get underneath the person, catch one of their legs and come up into some sort of entanglement. And although I'm not going into positions like 411, what you would call the saddle or the honey hole very often, I do often wind up in a standard ashi or a leg drag position from the bottom. And from there, I can quite easily sweep or get up or do what I want. So there's a lot of options there. And I would encourage people to look a bit deeper than the surface level advice. There will sometimes be people who say this game works best for short people or tall people, but Jiu-jitsu is so broad and open that you can probably find a way to customize things to your body type. And if no one else out there is doing something that works for you, you still have the possibility to invent your own game. I mean, you tell me if you disagree, but I find that at black belt, although we're all sharing knowledge, a big part of what we're all doing is putting our own stamp on things and doing things in our own way and adding our own level of uniqueness.
I definitely agree with that. And also, too, I'd like to go back to that point that you made about the turtle, because I'm also a pretty avid turtle player. It's like for me, so since a lot of my training is done for like 80cc rules, the big caveat is that if you turtle, like the general rule is like if you turtle for 3 seconds, it's not points. So like if you're getting past, turtle for 3 seconds. If you get taken down, turtle for 3 seconds. In the gym, we do turtle rounds every single day. And so like turtle has become kind of an like essential part of my open guard. So like if I'm training with like a big guy, or I'm training with someone who's passing my guard, or I'm getting tired, I feel like turtling is a great way to like, one, conserve energy, two, look for counterattacks from a bad situation, and three, look to maybe reverse your opponent. So there's a lot of options from the turtle that I think that can apply to kind of the stuff that we've been talking about today. So like turtling can lead to leg locks. Turtling can lead to taking the back. Turtling can lead to, sweeping or reversing. So I think that point that you made about the turtle is really important.
Yeah, this is where I think people get hung up on turtle. They think it's a fully defensive position where you're just letting the person maul you. When I was at the camp that we just did at Magic BJJ in Michigan, I taught a seminar that I called Turtle is Everywhere. And what I tried to do was to demonstrate effective turtle concepts from non-turtle positions. So specifically what I tried to show was how you can pass someone's guard using the same concepts as you would do if you're playing turtle. The difference is, instead of being compact and face down on the ground, you're compact and standing up in someone's guard. And if you think about it, things like turtle, butterfly guard, even what Josh Wentworth would call the honey badger, which is kind of like a curled up position inside someone's guard. These are really all just variations of turtle. That kind of compact ball-shaped position where you can explode out at any time is super powerful. And it's a great way to get into leg entanglements, because if you're all compact in a ball and say you're playing a seated guard like a butterfly, as long as you stay compact and maintain that elbow-knee connection, by definition, your opponent cannot pass your guard. It's impossible, because in order to pass your guard, they need to open the elbow-knee space and put something there. They can't get knee on belly, they can't get side control, they can't get mount, they can't get the back unless they can cut you in half like that. So if you are very good at staying compact, you can deny the pass for as long as you want. And as long as you're not just sitting there passively, I find that switching and rotating between things like turtle into butterfly guard, into a get up, into all sorts of other things, even into single leg X, it's a very powerful way for a small compact person to open up pathways to the legs. The trick is to just keep that elbow knee connection at all times and to play this position assertively instead of being fully defensive where you let them bring the fight to you.
Yeah, and I think that's a separate skill in itself, but it's a really essential one, which is like learning how to like, probably going to have to get submitted a lot in order to get really good at defending the turtle. But I find that like, for me, when I'm in turtle, what's everybody looking to do? They're looking to take the back. And when someone's carelessly trying to throw hooks in, that's like one of the best times to try to attack their leg, because they're just giving it to you if you know how to, properly attack from there.
It's the easiest way to get on top of someone, I find. The thing about sweeping in jiu-jitsu is everyone expects you to sweep. Or with wrestling up, people expect that. So they have the common sense to defend pathways to their legs. Whereas I get so many transitions because I'm turtled and the person thinks they can get a back take on me, or they make the mistake of bringing their leg within reaching distance of me, and I wind up on top of them. It's a lot more effective than people think, and it's actually quite easy to defend your back from turtle as long as you're smart about it. So I agree with you completely. That's a very good pathway to get up on top. Under IBJJF rules, maybe it's not ideal because if turtle is not considered a guard, you will not get 2 points for a sweep when you get up on top. But if you're under another rule set, turtle can be an incredible way to go from bottom to top. And I have found that is often way more efficient than trying to sweep a person because they simply don't expect you to do transitions from bottom to top when you're playing turtle.
Yeah, and I think that I would recommend for people, one thing that I've done from bottom turtle is I've studied a lot of folk style wrestling. I think that folk style wrestlers, they've got the turtle stuff down, in terms of like avoiding, because a lot of folk style wrestling is like, you don't want to let them throw the legs in, which is the same as, for us defending hooks. And now granted, the posture in jiu-jitsu is a little bit different than it is in wrestling because obviously a wrestler isn't worried about chokes, but things like Granby rolls, things like hip switches, or even stand-ups, these are techniques that I use every day that are from wrestling, but they are very applicable to no-gi jiu-jitsu or gi jiu-jitsu as well.
Awesome. Now, speaking of gi, we already talked about how gi players have a big advantage when it comes to pulling guard. Are there any other major differences that you would mention between gi and no-gi when it comes to how you go into open guard leg entanglements? I mean, of course, on one hand, you have differences in the rule set, which obviously inform what you will do, but also things like friction and newly available grips that you may have in the gi can change things. Are there any meaningful differences worth discussing?
Definitely. I think that when it comes to attacking the legs in the gi, so generally, the biggest thing is we aren't thinking about heel hooks at all, unfortunately, because that's just the way the sport is, which, we can talk about this some other time, but I think that it's kind of a strange rule. The leg locks in the gi are like, it's kind of a weird, like kind of arbitrary rule. It's weird that it's not allowed anywhere, but so we're not thinking about attacking heel hooks. So that's going to mean that we're going to put more emphasis taking the back, because when we're attacking the legs in the gi, we're generally not looking for, we're not trying to stay in 50-50 in the gi. As people always say, it's like Satan's gift to jiu-jitsu. If you remove the heel hook, 50-50 becomes a very boring position, and there's not really a whole lot that you can do there. So when I'm attacking leg locks in the gi, generally I'm looking more for straight ankle locks, I'm looking more for toe holds, I'm looking more for knee bars, and then I'm looking for the back. And so I think that when you're attacking leg entries in the gi versus no gi, I'm really going to attack the back, which means I'm going to use matrix style back takes. I'm going to use reverse De La Hiva, Kiss of the Dragon style sweep. So we're still doing this. The concept still applies of internal versus external rotation, but now we're going to modify it for the rule set that we're competing in and also for the friction, right? So the friction is going to make the back takes a little bit easier, but it's going to maybe make it a little bit harder for us to get all the way into that like good leg entanglement, at least in my experience. It's funny, like now I'll train in the gi and I don't train in the gi very much at all anymore. And then when I put the gi on, I'll all of a sudden find that it's harder to do the entries that I do every single day.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mentioned this from the aspect of pulling guard, how having a grip on the person's fabric makes it so much easier and actually can be a bit of a crutch because you can get dependent on the fact that the gi is there. And then if you wind up in a no-gi situation, you might find that all of your guard pulls are useless. But similarly, if you can get behind a person, the presence of the gi changes everything. The ability for you as a person on the bottom to just reach up and grab someone's belt or their pants, it changes everything if you can get behind them. I think of that banana peel sweep where you get behind someone and then you grab their belt and you kick out their legs and they fall over and now you're on their back. I've been doing a bunch of seminars with Rob Bernacki recently, and one of the things that he pointed out is if you get to that position on someone in the gi, that banana peel sweep is readily available. But in no gi, it's going to be a lot more challenging to get to someone's back from there. The absence of that belt grip changes so much. And so that's a very important distinction between gi and no gi when it comes to how you attack from the bottom. The ability to just reach up, grab the person and pull them down changes so many things. And if you're reliant on that, when you go to no gi, you might realize that there are so many holes in your game because a lot of what you were doing was completely dependent on the ability to grab and pull.
Well, so when we think about the belt grip or even like the pants grip or just what it represents is Once you establish that grip, your partner can't turn to face you anymore. It's like so much harder for them to turn to face you, which is going to make the leg lock almost irrelevant, because we have the posture. And there's not really a ton of leg locks that you can do in a gi rule set when you're in a backside position, right? You can't do a backside heel hook. You can maybe do a knee bar, but if you have that back control, you'd be sacrificing your best grip to try a submission. In no-gi, you don't have the ability to hold the back control position for so long from like a matrix style situation. If you're like, say you do like a K guard, they clear the knee line, and now you're in matrix position. Since I can't, in no-gi, I don't have a belt grip, which means that my partner can turn towards me anytime they want, really. If they just kind of rotate their hips, that turning towards us is going to open up leg entanglements.
Yeah, great insight there. I have said before that when I am playing Turtle, one of the worst things that can happen to me is my opponent getting a horse collar grip on me. So they're grabbing the back of my collar fabric behind me, because if they can get that grip, they can pull me wherever they want, and I can do very, very little about it. It kind of violates a lot of the things that we take as common rules about how to attack from the back, which is you want to maintain this chest to back connection. Well, if someone has a horse collar grip on you, or a back belt grip, or if they're able to pull your lapels under your armpits, they can hold you facing away from you, and there's very little you can do about it. I mean, if I'm playing Turtle and someone tries to hop on my back, I don't mind too much. Even if they try to do some sort of crazy stuff and bully me, I can live with that. But if they get a horse collar grip on me, I immediately know I have to do something right away, because they can force me to stick in this position where I just can't face them. And that's very, very hard to fight out of. Same if they grab the back of my belt. They can keep me in that alignment where now I'm always looking away from them. And if I try to run, then they can pull me back in. That's a very dangerous situation to get yourself into. So that's something to always think about, is in the gi, if someone can get behind you and they can grab your fabric so that you're stuck in that position, it's going to be a bad day at the office.
And also too, I think if you think about what kind of control in no-gi would be equivalent to like a horse collar grip or double under your collar grips in Turtle in the gi, you would have to get double unders and chest to back, head tight, or you would have to get a seat belt, head up by the ear, and you would have to be super attached to have a similar level of control in no-gi. So I think that taking the back escapes. I remember when I was a blue belt, I did an EBI rules tournament in the gi, because, it was 2017 and there wasn't as much of a distinction between gi and no gi. It was like a tournament was doing EBI rules, so that was what we were doing, and we're doing EBI rounds in the gi, and escaping the back is so much harder in the gi. In no gi, we, especially like I train with guys like Ethan and Ethan Krellinston and Nick Rod, who are back escape masters, and they just spin. And if I could just grab a collar on them, that would, even though they're bigger, or Nick Rod is bigger and more athletic, just a collar grip prevents the ability to turn. I think that's such a powerful grip, and in no-gi, it just doesn't exist. So the control, there's not really the equivalency for that control in the horse collar grip in no-gi would have to be extremely dominant position.
Yeah. I would ask here, as we tie this up, Chris, for someone who really wants to start thinking about adding an open guard leg entanglement strategy to their game, are there any things that you would recommend to pretty much anyone? General ideas or concepts that are going to be applicable almost all of the time, where you can confidently say, you should do these things. It's going to make your leg entanglements a lot better.
So I think that I would say the biggest thing is to do specific training rounds of leg entanglement positions. And also one thing that, now I'm no longer training with Jeff every day, but when I was training with Jeff, our positional rounds, we would do a seated versus standing positional round pretty much every session. That would like a comp session. I think that is really important, because you're going to be working on like the skill of like managing distance, maintaining guard retention, and looking to either sweep or submit. So I would say that would be kind of the biggest training tip, I would say, is positional rounds of leg entanglement. So you're working on leg locks and, clearing leg locks. And also too, one thing that I like to do when I play leg lock rounds in the gym, I like to let it go a little bit after the leg entanglement is over. If you clear my leg, but you're about to take my back, like let's keep going and then try to counter. So I'll try to go like deeper into the scrambles. I think that when a lot of people work on leg locks, they just focus solely on the leg lock. I think that if you really want to learn how to integrate leg locks and all of this stuff into your game, I think you should try to play out these situations a little bit, especially in specific condensed training situations.
Amazing, man. Well, there are going to be people who listen to this and they're going to want to see visuals. They're going to want to go deeper into the details, and hopefully they're also going to want to support you. So let's talk about this instructional. If people want to see your open guard practices and they want to learn from you in that manner, how can they go about doing that?
Yeah, so I will, I'll link you the instructional, so hopefully you can put it in the show description, but it's just on BJJ Fanatics. It's called Don't Stand Up, and essentially it covers everything that we talked about today and some more stuff. So it talks about leg entries, it talks about guard retention. There's some stuff about turtle. There's a lot of different stuff in there. There's some interplay with like wrestling up and upper body attacks and all kinds of different stuff like that. It's called Don't Stand Up on BJJ Fanatics. It's about 2 hours of open guard content. And sometimes it's also on the daily deal, so you can get it for cheap.
Nice, man. Well, I will put a link to that in the show notes. I definitely recommend people support you. Also, let's talk about the Grappler's Diary, my favorite newsletter. How do people go about acquiring that and signing up so that they can get your info in their mailbox every week?
Yeah, so hopefully we can put that link in the show description as well. It's also on my Instagram, and the Grappler's Diary has its own Instagram. So basically I post little essays every 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. The newsletter, there is a free article that goes out every Friday morning at 9 a.m. and it's gone out every Friday morning at 9 a.m. for about 3 years now. And it's kind of just about like my life and things that I'm like thinking about working on as a, full-time grappler and writer. And then I also have a premium side where I talk a little bit more, just a little bit more specific things that I'm working on. And you have a little bit more access to me. And it's just $8 a month. So that's kind of how the Grappler's Diary works. Also, if you check out any of my free products out there, I have a free ebook and a free email course for jiu-jitsu instructors. If you download those free products, you'll automatically get added to the list.
Amazing, man. Well, like you said, I will put all of those links to your newsletter, to your instructional, and to your social media in the show notes. I will also include links to my stuff. Everything we make lives at BJJMentalModels.com. I always recommend people go there and check out the back catalog of episodes. They're all intended to be as helpful as I hope this one was. They're also intended to be timeless, so you don't have to worry about them being focused on out-of-date information or out-of-date current events. We've also got our own newsletter. We finally crossed 10,000 subscribers. I'm super excited about that. You can sign up at BJJMentalModels.com for that as well, and I'll also put a link in the show notes. And beyond that, of course, everything that we do is supported by BJJ Mental Models Premium. If you want to come to one of our camps or seminars, like I talked about earlier, currently those are exclusive to premium subscribers, so you got to get on there. Additionally, I mentioned that I did a Turtle is Everywhere course. That's a video course, actually. It's from the seminar, and that material is also on BJJ Mental Models Premium. So if you want to see what we covered, then sign up there. Again, that also lives at BJJMentalModels.com. As far as I know, it's the biggest library of jiu-jitsu audio masterclasses and courses, plus professional podcasts from some of the best athletes and analysts in the sport. An amazing deal. I really recommend everyone check it out. First week is free. All of that's at BJJMentalModels.com. Link in the show notes too. But Chris, I always love these chats, man. It's awesome seeing you kind of on the come up here. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to talk to you while I was down there in Texas because I have wanted to connect with you in person. But yeah, hopefully at some point we can get together and do a camp or a seminar. That would be amazing. And I think a good time for everyone involved.
Yeah, I would love that. That would be great. Yeah, also always a blast coming on this show, man. Like I said, it's really cool for me because BJJ Mental Models for a long time was the only jiu-jitsu podcast that I listened to. And so it's cool that now I've been on it, and it sponsors my newsletter. So I'm really grateful for you and all the stuff that you do. I also definitely recommend that everybody who's listening, check out your stuff because a lot of it is good. And I've used a lot of it over the years, a lot of your resources.
I can't thank you enough for that, man. That really means a lot to me. And I appreciate your stuff as well. Hope that this has inspired a lot of people to check out your course and your newsletter, man. But all said and done, great chat. Always love having you here. Thanks a lot, Chris. And also thanks to the listeners too. Really appreciate everyone's time and attention. We'll talk to everyone next week. Take care.